Now he had become the still center of that film distribution hell of misfortune. The cinematic world turned round him, leaving him miraculously untouched. The little film circles the spinning wheel of cinematic cult status acceptance. The Croupier had reached his goal. He was no longer stuck in video hell.
Hello and welcome back to this damn fully dualistic crusade. This video is a review of the new Arrow 4K UHD release, restoration, and really resurrection of a cinematic treasure that was never properly given the release it deserved and was sort of staggered and in terms of its release in various countries and sort of just kind of tossed out there and left to be discovered over time by people in need of something that was intelligent and adult and acerbic and darkly funny and cynical. Essentially a film that was made by and for intelligent people, the breath of fresh air that we're so desperately always looking for and not really finding in this day and age. And that is the 1998 masterpiece Croupier, written by Paul Myersberg and directed by the legendary Mike Hodges. This was the sort of, it was essentially seen as the return to form for Mike Hodges, returning to at least a slightly similar vein to Get Carter, because this is essentially a crime mystery thriller, but it really defies genre. It's not a film where the plot is as concrete as other films. It's designed to be an experience. It's designed to leave questions in the viewer's mind. It's designed and meticulously crafted to be a puzzle-like film. It is so textured and multi-layered that it really does require and really call for multiple viewings over the years. It's a film that grows in the audience's mind, and there's also a certain dreamlike quality to it where you do question the reality of the story, particularly on multiple viewings, and you question even the narration because there is a degree of unreliability to the actual character narrating his own story, since he is in fact himself an aspiring writer, which also harkens back to the classic Mike Hodges film Pulp, which is all about Michael Caine's ghostwriter character also being a rather unreliable narrator, leading you to question the events in the film. So you can actually make references or identify core themes that do sort of echo past works of Hodges' career. Not that this was, I think, intended, but you naturally have echoes when somebody has a lot of central themes in their work. In revisiting the film this time around, I was struck once again by the film I'm most reminded of when I'm watching Croupier is Eyes Wide Shut, actually, and that goes into the whole notion of, again, there's a dreamlike quality to this film. It's extraordinarily realistic and in terms of its setting on a meager budget, but again, with the unreliable narration at times and seeing the film at different times and coming away with different opinions and seeing certain scenes different ways, every audience member seems to have a different interpretation of the overall film, and especially by the ending, which can be taken one of several ways. This is honestly just as crafted, satisfying, and open to interpretation as Eyes Wide Shut. I think that is the best comparison. So to talk about this film and simply say, oh, it's a crime thriller about the lead character of Jack Manfred, played by Clive Owen, who is an aspiring writer who also takes on a job at a casino to make ends meet, and essentially in telling himself he's going to use his experiences as a croupier at a London casino to write his great novel he's always been aspiring to write. But it becomes very quickly apparent that perhaps you could say he's losing himself in the world and the atmosphere, but you could also say, because he is so much of a chameleon in this film, that he's essentially shedding a skin and sort of enmeshing himself in a different landscape. He's a very interesting character that you don't exactly 100% know who this guy is. You may think you do, or you may choose to believe that you do and see the film in a certain way that's more grounded. But this is part of the film's allure, that you can take it a variety of different ways. And you also see how this character interacts, or shall we say doesn't fully interact with everyone else around him. He has his own conceptions of all the other characters and the world he finds himself in, the situation he finds himself in, and this is perfectly, beautifully underlined by the voiceover narration that's in the film. It's perfectly befitting because Jack is an aspiring writer, so we get to hear him essentially writing the novel he's always aspired to, and this beautiful voiceover dialogue that's wonderfully cynical and pithy in all the right places and bitterly funny. The film is hysterical throughout, but it's very nuanced humor. It's very biting and dark and acerbic humor. So if you were looking for a film that was as cynical as your viewpoint of the world is, if you need that shot of espresso in a film, that's Croupier. It is one of the most satisfying films to return to. And I'm still amazed we got this release, because the film was essentially dumped by the company who made it. It was made on a very, very minuscule budget, and Hodges and the entire production had to do all kinds of things to cut corners. They did wind up shooting a good chunk of the film, or actually most of it, in Germany and in other places in order to stretch the budget further. This was financed by Film 4, who essentially got the film back and didn't like what they apparently didn't even get it. They just plain hated it, and so the film was essentially dumped, and it was left to some independent distributors to actually put the film out here in the U.S. and get at least some decent word of mouth going. And then there was a short-lived UK theatrical release, but was really only seen and fully discovered by people once it hit the video market, and of course the occasional television airing. This unfortunately has meant that not only do you see different years applied to the film, when it was actually produced in 1998, but it's just sort of come and gone, and only diehard cineasts seem to know about this film, or fans of Mike Hodges, or Clive Owen fans, or people who are just, if you find a great sort of noirish film, or neo-noir, or whatever you want to call it, and it is legitimately great, you just hold on to it like a piece of driftwood from a shipwreck, and you just cling on to it, and you refuse to let it go, and you have to tell everyone you can about it, because it is so rare to have a truly great neo-noir type film. This was actually going to be a film in a series I've been wanting to do. Essentially, I wanted to do videos on films that were stuck in what I like to call video hell, and Croupier has been stuck in that ever since its original theatrical releases. I do remember seeing the release poster in a theater and seeing the wonderful still of Clive Owen in tuxedo in the casino, and just knowing that I had to see whatever this film was. But unfortunately, we got the poster, but it never actually came to my area, and I was a kid then, and then it took a couple years to catch up with it on video, and we had a horrible DVD here in the U.S. I mean, it was bare bones. It had a really not so good transfer, and a lot of the video transfers over the years have really just they make the film look more like a made-for-television film, which it certainly isn't, because the contrast is shot, the color's not very good, the detail's pretty bad, and some of them actually even only include a mono audio mix. The film has a stereo mix, but even the audio got messed with. So it's been treated like a cheap straight-to-video movie is how it's been sort of handled. We did finally get a Blu-ray, which was really subpar and based on some old master from who knows when, and had a lot of the same problems. So if you've seen this film before, you may not have gotten the best impression of it, because the transfers have been atrocious. There was finally a director's commentary, but it was only on certain releases, which is why I have the Region 4 DVD here, which at least is slightly better than the awful American DVD, and it has the Mike Hodges commentary, but it's in PAL format, so you have to with film speed up, unfortunately. So the film has been cursed for a good number of years in terms of just not having a proper version to be able to fully appreciate just how meticulously crafted every single frame of this film is. And that's why the Arrow release was such a shock, and why it's such an absolute dream of a disc. Not only is this a brand new 4K scan from the original negative with Dolby Vision grading and new extras, but it's really the only video release, or the only other release this film has ever had, besides seeing the film on some of the very short-lived original theatrical runs, where it actually looks like a film again, and you can just submerge into this cynical, dark, shadowy, bitterly dark, but hysterical at times world of Jack sort of eking out at least a barely passable sort of existence, where it seems like he's almost going through the motions, trying to suffer enough to be able to generate the great novel that is churning within him, but in reality not really getting much of anywhere until he takes the Croupier job. And again, we see him sort of shed his outer shell, and whether this is an emerging character or another sort of skin he puts on is up to the individual viewer. And he then starts rewriting, or essentially starts a new novel based on the casino experience, and creates a sort of amalgam of the people around him, and it comes up with this new character, which of course is supposed to be represented or inspired by someone he works with, but it's also rather plainly obvious that Jack starts to see himself in this character he's created of Jake, and that Jake takes risks and is a much nastier person and does all kinds of things, and it starts to look as if the supposed role or character is being lived out by Jack himself in the process of crafting this novel. And the actual names are so similar and start being used interchangeably, and Jack actually starts using Jake in his voiceover narration, which gets into the themes of identity and the sort of you don't know quite exactly what is real at times. That's that wonderful dreamlike puzzle atmosphere that very much, I think, strongly connects this film with Eyes Wide Shut. And I think anybody who sees this and is a great Kubrick fan will get a lot out of it, because Hodges was not only friends with Kubrick, but also had a lot of similar themes. He just approached things in a much different way. But there's a lot of interesting core similarities that will make Kubrick fans really appreciate this. So I think the Eyes Wide Shut comparison is very valid, because this is really the only other film that really feels the same way. However, this film is so tightly constructed, it is so meticulously crafted, that there is not a wasted frame, there is not a wasted shot, there is not even a wasted sound effect. The sound design of this film is so meticulous that everything is crafted and placed there to convey an exact meaning at an exact point in time. Hodges was always very much a director who was not big on music leading the audience. So the music, like in pretty much every Hodges film, is very sparse, but also extremely memorable. You'll have the theme of the film stuck in your head for days afterwards. The music perfectly suits the film, but it is very sparse, and that keeps everything grounded to a certain degree, but it also adds a certain eeriness, because we're sort of wired or programmed to expect a lot of music to carry a film along or tell us how we're supposed to feel, and that's something Hodges hated. So he uses silence in such just a beautifully striking way throughout all of his films. But here in Croupier, you get the sense of, especially because of all the films and the years of not being able to get a project off the ground or get a film made leading up to this point, all of the near successes or the misfires or the misses, and his reputation sort of being dragged through the mud throughout the 80s and 90s, that this was not just, oh, this is a return to form. I think that's a bit unfair. I think had he been given a fair chance, there would have never been a need to return to said form, because he never lost said form. But this is a sort of vindication feeling. This is somebody finally getting to summit the mountain they were trying to climb. It's like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill and finally getting the rock to the top of the hill. And then the film just kind of got dumped and forgotten, and then said rock just slipped back down the hill again. And Hodges did have at least a great sense of humor about things, and I think by this point he was probably kind of used to that. He did still fight tooth and nail for the film, but it also, if you know anything about filmmaking, or you aspire to make films yourself, and you know how, despite your best intentions, even if you make a masterpiece like this film, it doesn't always get its audience. It doesn't always get to the status or distinction that it deserves. Well, this is one of, I think, the best cases. This is a film that only grows better over time. This is a film that deepens with every viewing. This is a film that shows almost a career trajectory from Get Carter and his earlier television films. He always played with some of these same themes, but here, along with Paul Meyersberg, who wrote a brilliant script, this is toying with those things. It's extraordinarily active, even though the film itself has a certain pace and can be a bit off-putting if you're just expecting a straightforward crime story. If you're expecting a straightforward narrative, this may seem a bit distant the first time you see it, which I think leads a lot of people to sort of write it off. So I would definitely tell people who have only seen this film once, or it was a long time ago, this is a film you do have to revisit. This is a film that opens up when you're able to meet it halfway. It's not a film that's going to make anything easy, but it's a film that if you can do that, you can just fall into its world and its rhythm, and there is not a false note anywhere. You can summarize this film very, very simply, which I've pretty much already done. It's not a film about the plot. It's not a film about even the actual crime element that pops up. It's a film about small moments that change people's trajectories, and also not only can they cope with it, but how do they do that? And what does it do to people? What does the society we have created change or affect people? And do their lives have any meaning? I mean, this film gets very dark if you want to follow the various threads, and it builds to really several gut punches of only even one of those would be an amazing gut punch ending with a lot of impact, where things suddenly come to a head, and it's things that you didn't necessarily expect would happen. But we have several of those, and some of them are even more on the humorous side. So in that sense, this is a film that so beautifully reflects the unpredictable nature of life itself. This is a film you can analyze forever, and you'll still not get everything on paper. And again, it's totally up to every single audience member's interpretation. Everyone is going to get something different out of this. And every time I come back to it, I am just totally reinvested, and I come out reinvigorated. This is one of those films that, honestly, you see it and it makes you hopeful about the possibility of cinema again. I cannot state that more strongly. I know most people have not had the same reaction. Particularly, it did get good critical notices, but it's not a film that gets bandied about a lot. But for those who appreciate beautifully crafted films that are not going to spoon feed an audience and are not about plot or genre defining everything, that allow you to make up your own mind, that intrigue you, that do things to be creative but also have a sense of intelligence and integrity to the story that's actually being told. This isn't an arty movie for artiness sake. This isn't a movie that completely ignores its plot. So it's a film that works, I think, on all levels and only grows over time. And if you look at the film just for its technique, it is just a textbook on how to make all kinds of different scenes, sequences, tones, story elements, character beats come across as completely effective but 100% natural at all times. This is a film where the craft is invisible because it is so meticulously put together that only people who look at the actual construction of a film afterwards are going to suddenly realize, hey, wait a minute. So how did they get this to work? And then you go and you look at the actual sequence again, and suddenly you realize that, in the middle of a impromptu card game between supposed friends, that Hodges all of a sudden does a single take that pans around the entire card table, and there's no cuts and no breakaways, and it runs for several minutes, and it's so flawless that it feels, it has an effervescent quality. The whole film feels like there is not only a creative spark, not only a full sense of being in this place and time. The story itself has a reality, even though it's a bit puzzle-like and it has this dreamlike air. You are fully in this world from the opening credits to the end credits. There's no breaking of that fourth wall. But there's this sense of freedom here in terms of the actual construction of the actual filmmaking itself, that anything could be done, but it was only going to be done with the utmost care and attention to detail, and always to serve the individual scene that was being shot on that very day. It is an absolutely flawless, faultless work from all aspects, including even the meticulous crafting of the sound design. The mix of this film is exceptional, even though it's only stereo and it's not a multi-channel track. There is not one facet of this film that did not have just the utmost care put into it. This is something you don't see in 2023. This is something we don't get anymore, where you have a film that is not from an assembly line, a film that was developed over years as a script, and then in the actual process of making it into a film was further developed between the writer and director, where both of them, while they had slightly different ideas, focused on the material to make it live and breathe on the screen. So that is why Mike Hodges, who also very rightly hated the "a film by" credit, which is stupid, actually has it as Mike Hodges and Paul Myersberg, because without Myersberg's script and original conception and building the script further when they started to make the film, you wouldn't have anything. And it is the combination of the two minds that really make this film. So that is a wonderfully humble thing for Hodges to have done, but I think a sign of his integrity, of course. But that is perfect for this film because it is the two of them. So that's why you have other elements that are not in other Hodges films, and it does give Croupier a unique flavor. So it is a completely unique film. There is nothing else like it. I make the comparisons to Eyes Wide Shut because I think those are valid, and I think you will definitely get reminded of that if you're a big Kubrick fan and you love Eyes Wide Shut like I do. Of course, after this point, Hodges would get to make one further feature film, again with Clive Owen, called I'll Sleep When I'm Dead, which similarly got good critical notices, or at least mostly good, and then just kind of came and went and wasn't really supported, and is also incredibly underrated, and I highly recommend people see that. But that film, because it in some ways is sort of a spiritual successor to Get Carter, and much more obviously so. That led a lot of people to unfairly label it a Get Carter remake, which it is not. But if you love Croupier and you haven't seen I'll Sleep When I'm Dead, you definitely should. And that did just finally get a Blu-ray release, but you have to get the imprint Australian import disc. But at least it finally does have an HD presentation out there, although I'm sure it's just Paramount's old DVD master in HD, unfortunately. But this is one of those truly special films from the last 30 years. It's one of the best films of the last 30 years. That's no question. This is a film about, obviously, the human condition and society at large. There is, as with every Mike Hodges picture, there is a great deal of intelligent but very provoking societal criticism. That is a absolute tenet, a core tenet of his entire body of work, and really another of the many reasons why I adore his work so much. But this is a film that will not and does not and refuses to sugarcoat anything, which makes it even more satisfying. This is one of those films that when you come back to it, it's like you've been walking through the desert for months and you're on death's door and you need water and you've just thought about nothing else and you've just been again on the edge of death going through the cinematic desert, and then you come to Croupier again and you are just not only healed, but you come away renewed. That's what I get from Croupier every time. It is absolutely a meticulously, beautifully crafted, really handcrafted, because they didn't have a lot of money, and this was made by an entire cast and crew who actively cared about what they were doing. It is an absolute gem. It's one of the most underrated films ever made, and it so incredibly deserves this new 4K restoration and release. It has deserved it for decades. It has been stuck in horrible transfers, which have not helped its reputation. It is not a direct-to-video film to be forgotten about. This was a beautifully made film that should have had better support. It should have been supported by the company that actually financed it instead of them throwing it away. And it should have been in award competition, but unfortunately, just because it was shown, I think on German or Danish television one time, that what made it get removed from Academy consideration, which I think is an absolute crime, because this is so beautifully crafted and made on every single level that it still to this day is, I think, one of the best films of the past 30 years. It is absolutely perfect, and it only becomes more endearing and more impactful the more time that goes by, and the more that you come back to it and you rewatch it and you find new layers and new textures and new pieces of the puzzle that you didn't see on the last viewing. And if that were not all, this is still probably Clive Owen's best performance in a film. He is just such a joy in this film, which is a very dark film. So for him to have such such an energy and such a screen presence here, where it's just remarkable how much his character you get invested in his character, who does unlikable things and sort of loses himself in this new world he's creating in his own head, and how this comes crashing down frequently in the actual reality of the story he finds himself in. But also, I think it's that slight... There's a slight degree of maybe a twinkle in the eye. Not necessarily... There's a little bit of humor in the character. There's a little bit of that. But it's really more of... The film itself has a twinkle in the eye. You get the sense of Mike Hodges behind the camera. You get the sense of Paul Meyersberg actually behind the words being spoken. There's an additional sense of the actual people making this film, trying to make it special and trying to find those of us in the audience who recognize that, and that makes us treasure this film even more. This is a film at least I just want to literally just wrap in a bear hug every time I rewatch it. It's just like, oh, I forgot what a real film was like. A real film of meaning and substance that is like sustenance for the diehard cinephile when you just don't get that. And again, it's like you've walked through the cinematic desert for months and years, and you're just about to throw in the towel. This is one of those films that helps you rediscover your love of the cinematic medium. It is one of the best films of the past 30 years. It should have won Oscars, but due to dumb technicalities and Oscar politics, it wasn't even allowed to be nominated, which is a crime. So please do go and check this film out. This is the perfect release to finally see this film for the first time, and it is just an absolute majestic gem of a picture that deserves to be recognized as the masterpiece it always has been. Now, to talk about the Arrow release, the picture quality of this brand new 4K UHD is absolutely revelatory if you've ever seen how bad this film looked on all of the other video releases. This was a 4K scan from the original camera negative. It has also been given Dolby Vision HDR grading. This is not a gigantic Arrow special edition in terms of having multiple discs and transfers and things. It didn't get an encoding by Fidelity and Motion like some of theirs do, and Fidelity is pretty much regarded as the best in the business at encoding. But this is still a very handsome looking disc. I just wish it had gotten that as well. But compared to everything that it has come before, this is just a complete revelation. The HDR grading is very tasteful. It is done perfectly. There are no moments of light sources popping out, and given that this film has all the scenes in the casino and a lot of nighttime street scenes and a lot of very intimate interiors in terms of apartments and things with almost bare light fixtures on the walls or lamps and things, that could be a definite problem if you were not very careful with the HDR grading. Now, this was actually supervised by Mike Hodges before he passed away. He was able to supervise the new 4K restoration of both Croupier and Get Carter, thankfully, and see them come out but before his passing. So I'm actually very glad that was able to happen, not just for the transfer, but for him to be able to see two of his great works actually get the proper treatment they've always deserved, and to look so brilliant, so that at least he was able to see that before he left us. So this is a beautiful transfer. The grain structure resolves very well. It's just, I think, in a spot or two, if you are an extreme videophile, you might notice, as I did, particularly watching on a 4K OLED, that there's maybe just a faint, fleeting moment in a couple frames in one or two spots where it seems like the grain kind of sticks a little here and there, but it is just like the most fleeting spots in really just one particular moment. Then there are also a number of very, very, very tiny original film elements creeping in the form of there is an occasional light speck here and there. And because the whole transfer looks so beautiful and pristine, they stand out a bit more when you have like maybe 5 to 7 individual specks scattered throughout the entire film. So this is not it's a nearly pristine transfer, and if this is just how it is, and this is what we have to not have a over-scrubbed DNR mess of a transfer like what we get on a number of releases, then I'm perfectly fine with having 5 or 6 specs scattered throughout the whole film. But if you notice things like that, you will see just a handful of very light individual specks scattered throughout the feature. There's also a little bit of natural movement and noise in the actual titles because these were optically done titles. They were not digitally made, so there's a little bit of natural movement. So the transfer is just, of course, making the natural movement of the actual titles actually much more apparent because it's much more in your face because you're looking at it on a 4K OLED television, and you're going to notice elements of the actual filmmaking process in the pre-digital age be much more apparent. So you do see a little bit of movement and noise in the titles. I did also look at the film in HDR10 mode. I disabled Dolby Vision to see what the HDR10 layer looked like. It also looks excellent, so for those who don't have Dolby Vision capability, you'll still get a beautiful experience. However, it is noticeably not as good as the Dolby Vision in terms of it almost looks a little bit milkier in some of the levels. It's not as 100% dynamic as the Dolby Vision grading is. This is pretty much common with every comparison you make between HDR10 base layer and a Dolby Vision grade. Really, Dolby Vision is the best way to go when you're doing HDR, and it's a shame more releases don't spring for that, but you can definitely tell the Dolby Vision is an improvement, but the HDR10 base layer is still very, very good and rather close in most areas. So if you don't have Dolby Vision, and especially if you're not watching on an OLED, the difference will be much more marginal. But if you have an OLED television, you will definitely notice more of a difference. So this is one of those titles that it really does benefit watching it in Dolby Vision, and that's why I think Dolby Vision is so important to have, and I think it should be better and more widely adopted by both releases and manufacturers in making players and televisions. Now, as for the audio, it's a little bit confusing because the packaging says the film carries a 2.0 and a 5.1 mix, and the disc only has a 2.0 mix. As far as I'm aware, Croupier was never mixed in multi-channel. Every version I've ever come across is stereo, and then some of the worst video editions just literally fold it down to a mono track. As I believe the film was just mixed stereo. Again, it was financed by Film 4 and didn't have a gigantic budget, and the credits are generic in terms of the sound credits. So I don't think Croupier ever had a multi-channel mix. So just having a stereo track here is what it should have, and it's just the packaging is incorrect. There is no 5.1 mix. Unless there was one that existed, or it's an upmix of the stereo that was done at some point and Arrow just didn't include it. But I don't think it's that. I think it's literally, it was just a mistake because, again, I've never seen the film have anything other than a stereo mix. Now, some people might think that you might be able to matrix this, that it might be a 4-channel matrix stereo track. I did double check that and play around with it. The track is so well designed and so beautifully done that it actually does decently if you use Dolby Pro Logic 2X or 2Z or whatever you have in your system. But you can tell pretty quickly it was not intended for surround, because when you do that, while the effects do fill out the surrounds nicely and it's still a nice sounding experience, you do get some moving around of voices and some leakage and some echoing and things that wasn't intended. So you can tell very quickly it meant for stereo listening. But should you desire to listen to it in surround anyway, it's still such a well done mix that you'll still be able to listen to it, and it still sounds good, but it obviously wasn't intended. So again, you should just listen to this in regular stereo, which is how it's encoded. The quality is beautiful. It sounds far better than the older releases I have, and certainly better than my Region 4 PAL DVD. So I have no complaints whatsoever. And this is a film you want to listen to carefully and closely, because just as the story and the photography and the performances are so meticulously crafted, so is the sound design. Hodges even talks about this in his commentary, that he took specific care to worry about not just the placement of sound effects, but the levels of the Foley effects, where to put the very sparse music cues so that the sound is just as meticulously crafted and designed as the rest of the film. So it's a complete experience. There isn't an aspect of this that is, just tossed off. So having the original stereo mix as it was mixed and intended in lossless quality is extremely important. So don't be thrown by the fact that there is no surround and there is no 5.1 and you can't matrix this track out. This is how this film was designed to be. It is a stereo mix, and it is a beautiful stereo mix. It is a phenomenal audio mix, even though it's not multi-channel. Now we come to the actual artwork and design of the Arrow release. This is in a beautiful limited edition package with slipcover and brand new gorgeous artwork custom for this release. I do wish, though, that this had gotten the nice deluxe limited hard case box like Arrow's Prince of Thieves and a lot of other labels have been doing. I'm still happy to get this in any way, shape, or form with lovely new art and things, but I love this film and adore it so much that I wish it had also gotten the deluxe case, but I'll take anything I can get. This is still absolutely gorgeous with the extras on the back, and then removing the slipcover gives you the 4K case with the same artwork. The artwork is reversible, so you can actually display the original poster image. This is the shot of Owen I referred to before that was on the limited US theatrical release poster. Inside we have 2 discs, the UHD and supplements, and then this too is the documentary, which I'll go over in just a moment. We also get a lovely booklet with new essay that very wonderfully has the cover of the book that Jack is trying to write in the film actually done as the booklet cover. This is a nice booklet. It has 2 new essays plus a lot of nice stills. So it's typical to what you get in most Arrow booklets of the non, super box set limited editions. So it is a nice read. It runs about 35 pages. And then we also get the technical notes about the new presentation. And then, not to be outdone, they have also included a nice little fold-out poster of the new artwork. It's nicely printed, but it's not, on like thick cardstock like the limited edition boxes are. And of course, it's a little smaller, but it's still lovely, wonderfully frameable, and you should definitely frame this. But it's also reversible with the original poster artwork. Again, apologies for the glare. It's hard to hold these on camera, but I've always wanted this poster, so this was lovely to get included in here. Now to go over the supplemental features, which are quite extensive for this release. We have the new 4K restoration in Dolby Vision, along with uncompressed original stereo audio. We have both subtitles and also audio description track for the visually impaired. We have a brand new audio commentary by Josh Nelson. It's a wonderful listen and will only enrich your experience with this film. And it's wonderful we got a new commentary for this because if this film ever was going to get a new scan or newer release, I never expected it to get the deluxe treatment. So all of these, each and every one of these is a treat. But the new Josh Nelson commentary is excellent. And then we also get the aforementioned Mike Hodges commentary, which he did for, I guess, the old British DVD release, and it's only turned up on certain international releases. That is ported here, synced to this new transfer, and it is a must-listen commentary for all time, like all of his tracks. He goes into incredible detail about the film, his experience making it, his whole conception of it, how he tried to bring a Myersburg script to life, some of the differences he had with Myersburg, and how the story developed. So it is just as warm and insightful and funny and honest and, again, completely honest as Hodges always was. So this is another gold standard, one of the best commentary tracks ever recorded, a must listen, and it's so wonderful to have here because, again, before this point, it was just on various scattered international releases. Then we have the piece entitled A Streak of Fortune, which is a brand new, really lengthy interview with Paul Myersburg about his career and the conception and then making of Croupier and the aftermath too. He is incredibly candid. It is a really lengthy, wonderful interview that you will just forget the time and watch all of it in one sitting, and I recommend you to. It is a perfect piece and just beautiful that Arrow was able to get him to sit down and talk at length about Croupier and his career. It is a wonderful extra. Then we get an interview with the actress Kate Hardy entitled beautifully, film, scones, and fury. She not only talks about her role in Croupier and the production and her experience, but also her long friendship with Hodges, which developed over the course of making Croupier and only continued. She was pretty much friends with him from Croupier onward, even into his final years. So it's a beautifully nice and lengthy interview. She talks about her early days getting into acting, and then also getting into other aspects of production and getting into directing herself, and what the experience of Croupier meant to her and what she tried to bring to her character. And it's just a beautiful, again, full range, all-encompassing interview, and also gives you even greater insight to Hodges himself from a close friend. So another beautiful, essential inclusion of the extras. Then we also get an archival interview with Mike Hodges at the British Film Institute around the time of Croupier's release, and he talks about his career and things. So it's pretty lengthy, but also he does get into, he doesn't make any bones about it, about how Croupier was kind of getting buried and how he's having to really struggle to try and even get it a UK theatrical release and get any sort of support. So this is a sort of time capsule, or showing you how Hodges was at that particular time. I'd say around about, I'd guess like maybe 99, maybe 2000, somewhere around there. I guess just before they started working on the first go at trying to clean up Get Carter for the DVD release, which the BFI did most of the legwork on. So it's around that time period. And just any Hodges interview is worth its weight in gold, so this is another lovely inclusion. We also get the original trailer, which looks pretty good, but it seems like it's an old standard def trailer that's been upscaled. We also do get a rather nice image gallery. The images are great. Not all of them are high definition. Some of them have been upscaled, and weirdly, it does repeat one or two of them at the end. But it's a solid image gallery. It's just, some of the images are unfortunately lower res. And that's it for Disc 1. And I should also mention, this is like a lot of Arrow releases. If you don't have 4K capability, you have to buy the Blu-ray release separately, which does include all the extras. So I wish they would make dual format releases. They do that on some of their steelbooks, but unfortunately this is just another case where the Arrow is unfortunately UHD and extras only, and you have to purchase the Blu-ray release separately. And then we come to Disc 2, which is entirely devoted to the new, for this release, documentary entitled Mike Hodges, A Filmmaker's Life. If you've seen my Best Discs of the Year awards video for 2022, you'll know that I said this was the best supplement of the year. And calling it a supplement or just a mere extra is doing it a disservice. This is a full 2-hour plus intimate one-on-one conversation with Mike Hodges. That is not just about his career, but about his view on life in general, just really getting the sense of who this person is, even more so than we ever have before in terms of all the interviews he's done over the years, because it is over 2 hours long, it's one-on-one, and he goes through all of his films beat for beat, and all of the hassles and the hurdles he had to overcome, and all of the setbacks that seem to continually plague him. And also he admits all of his faults and all of his moments of sticking to his guns, whether that was a good career move or not, that he always maintained his integrity, and usually that didn't help him out in the long run. But he always has a sense of humor about himself, and always a self-deprecating humor and a sense of humility, always, that is just so completely endearing. But this was also done around this time period, so it is unbelievably poignant to sit through, because you know that this was just before he unfortunately passed away. And so you do have that there is such a profound feeling of, I hate to say sadness, because it's not morbid, and he doesn't seem to have been that type of person, but there is such a poignancy there. There is a tinge of sadness, and if you have followed his career and been a fan of his, and you do aspire to make films yourself, you know how difficult it can be to even get a film made, let alone maintain a career. And to hear firsthand somebody having an entire career that could have and should have gone further than it did, not for lack of trying, just of running into so many different setbacks and being stuck with projects that just went nowhere or went south really fast. Not for any of your own actions, not due to anything you did. It definitely it tugs at the heartstrings. Absolutely, it does make you tear up a little bit. Just naturally so, and it is done in such a beautiful, simple way. I mean, David Cairns does the interviewing and things, but we never actually see him on camera. It's all Hodges and then stills and things from his films, so you get the sense of this is not just somebody's body of work, but this is really their history and the story of their own life, professionally and creatively, and also getting into his personal life, which he doesn't, sugarcoat, and he doesn't, he talks about mistakes that he made, and he talks about his marriages a bit, and it's like you're actually there talking to the person in their own house with them, and it's just so incredibly moving and intimate and frequently hysterical at times because of all the jokes he's cracking, frequently at his own expense, which again, it's so incredibly endearing. So if you've never experienced a Mike Hodges interview, this will give you the just an incredible sense of who this man was and why those of us who are fans of his work are definite fans of his work, and you can see the person in the films, whether you believe in auteur theory or not. There wasn't anything he ever did that didn't have his own stamp on it, or his own worldview, or his own sense of detached but very wonderfully cheeky, morbid, cynical humor that it just makes them such a unique experience. So he did leave behind a body of work that I think was and is completely representative of who he was as a person, and this is just driven home through this documentary that is, I hate to even call it a documentary. It's one of the best I've ever seen. And because it's so simple, and because it flows in a natural sort of way. And yes, it's just a 2-hour conversation, but it's also someone essentially recounting their entire life story in a beautiful, engaging, and moving way. I sat through the whole thing from start to finish and did not move. It didn't matter. I didn't pause. I didn't stop. I didn't care how long it was. I could have had another 2 hours. It is so beautifully done and so poignant. It's one of the absolute best documentaries on someone in the filmmaking industry that has ever been. And it's just an intimate conversation. That's how good this is. That's how beautifully done it is. And it will leave you with such a feeling of poignancy. It really does. So to simply label this an extra is doing it a disservice. It could have been sold on its own. You can show this, and you should show this in an art house theater as a documentary in its own right. It is that beautifully done, that engaging, that genuinely moving. So it is, I think, a perfect tribute to Hodges as a person and as a director and as somebody who always, always, always tried to make films that mattered. Whether it came off or not, that was what he always did, and he always maintained his own integrity, even if it didn't necessarily make him the most popular person in the film industry, which he really was not for, pretty much 99.9, if not 100% of his entire career. And that the fact he was able to find his sense of humor in that which is extraordinarily difficult to live with, being in that scenario, is, I think, just an incredible testament to who he was as a person. So this release is already exceptional and a must-own and has an incredible extras package. But adding this documentary and giving it its own second disc is just, it elevates the entire release into one of the absolute essential must-own, and I think one of the best physical media releases there currently is available. This documentary, again, is so good that it should be examined on its own. It is not a mere supplement. So those are my thoughts on the Arrow release of the 1998 masterpiece, Croupier, directed by Mike Hodges, written by Paul Myersberg, and starring Clive Owen. Again, I think this is a film that has never gotten the reception it deserved. I think this is one of the best films of the last 30 years. And for anyone who has not experienced this film or has only seen it on the horrible video editions it's had in the past, this is a must. This is one of Arrow's best releases, and to be quite frank, it's one of their most important UHD releases so far, because this film has always deserved a better reputation, because it never got a fair shot. It never got a fair shot in the UK, in the US, or anywhere, and then people saw it on video and thought it was straight to video because of the way it was sold and marketed. Really not at all, and the transfers not being so good, it really affected, I think, the way the film impacted people when they finally got to see it. But anyone who's ever seen this film will know and remember just how different it is, and how it, for those who appreciate handcrafted, beautifully made films that are made for intelligent people, how this is like getting that first glass of water after walking through the desert for 4 months. Is like, this is one of those films that will reinvest you in the cinematic medium, and it is one of Mike Hodges' masterpieces, and proof once again that he truly was a great director and one of the most underrated directors of the 20th and 21st century as well. And he never got the critical standing that he deserved and would have gotten had his career gone better. So this is one of the triumphs he was able to accomplish and finish without it being destroyed. But then, because his career was seemingly cursed in different ways, then the film got buried by the people who paid for it, and then it has sort of made its way out in various areas over the years. But it's only been those of us who see this film and cherish it who sort of wave the flag for it and promote it. So I know I've shown this film over the years to many people. Not everyone seems to get it, but I think it is such a rewarding experience to come back to. It only grows and develops more and opens up further the more you see it, and the more time you spend with it, and the more time you spend reflecting on it and examining the puzzle in your head and looking more closely at how all the puzzle pieces start to fit with each other, even though they might not seem like they fit on the surface or the first viewing. They really do, because it is so beautifully crafted down to every last frame. So I hope I have convinced you to check out the Arrow UHD release of Croupier with the new 4K scan and Dolby Vision grading, an incredible supplemental features package, and the must-watch 2-hour documentary, Mike Hodges, A Filmmaker's Life, one of the best film documentaries, I think, that has ever been made. So on that note, I hope my babbling about how much I absolutely adore and cherish Croupier has been at least somewhat fun and informative. Please do check out the Arrow UHD release. I cannot recommend it strongly enough. It was the surprise release for me of 2022, and I'm still stunned that both Get Carter and Croupier got beautiful new 4K restorations, supervised and participated on by Mike Hodges in the same year, and got beautiful disc releases that are affordable. And this was able to happen and be pulled off, and for Mike Hodges to be able to actually see before he passed away that his two most highly regarded films overall got fully restored and got a nice sort of fanfare surrounding them, and that he got to he got to leave this earth essentially, seeing his two most highly regarded films be treated with the reverence they always have had for those of us who have seen them and loved them and cherished them and recognized how great they were even on the first time. So that there's a certain poignancy there as well that makes these even more special. So as always, do keep supporting both boutique and studio labels by buying films on disc to help keep physical media and film culture alive. And thank you ever so much for watching.
Now he had reached the point where he no longer heard the sound of falling on deaf ears. The Arrow Films 4K restoration had brought him home to the place where he was born. The Croupier's mission was accomplished. At last he was seen as a masterpiece. He had acquired the power to make you swoon.